Hello and welcome to Learn from the Masters Music Outreach presentation on how to play Paka by Keaggy. My name is Adam Cord and I'm going to take you through this fun little piece by Phil. And we'll have to start with the tuning, which is a little unusual. It's a Keaggy custom special. You start off in standard tuning and then you take your fifth string, which is normally A, and you tune it up to B. So you're going to go up a step. And then you take your fourth string, which is normally D, and take it down to C sharp. All the other strings remain the same as standard tuning. So your final tuning is E, B, C sharp, G, B, and E. And one of the interesting things that this creates is because this is kind of a Chet Atkins-y thumb picking tune where the thumb bounces back and forth between strings 6 and 4 a lot. Normally you would have two octaves there. You would have, if you're playing E, your other string would be also an E. If you were playing blues, you might have a D in there to sound bluesy. Because this is a C sharp, you have a sixth there, which creates some really interesting harmonies and different sounds than your ear expects, and that's one of the appeals, I think, of the piece. A brief explanation of how I have come to think about the sections of this piece when I refer to them in the lesson. There's basically what I consider the intro, which is the part that starts, and what follows from there. That's what I consider to be the intro, or the A section. Then there's the verse, which begins with this phrase. That section there is what I will refer to as the verse. And then you have what I call the bridge, which begins with this part. And the majority of this song can be understood in terms of those three sections, because they're arranged and a couple parts repeat throughout, but that seems to be the best way to think of it as, if you want to call it A section, B section, C section. A would be this, B would be this, and then C would be starting with this. So when you hear me refer to those parts, that's what I'm thinking of. And then there's a finale part at the very end, which is all different material, but that'll be evident when we get there. We just start off up here on the 12th fret, and if you have fairly just intermediate level skill, I think, of how to play alternate thumb style playing, Chet Atkins style, where this thing can be steady like this. Your thumb is just going. This piece will be very accessible to you. A couple of the chord shapes are unusual, but it's not too bad. So we start off up here on the 12th fret. So there's your melody line, and you're just bouncing back and forth between E and C sharp. I tend to finger it that way. I think Phil sometimes uses his third finger here. I tend to use 4. I don't whatever your hand likes. Now we go to a bar chord here at the 7th fret and throw your third finger in here. Most of the work is being done here by the right hand at this point. So we have, take the same chord shape back 2 frets. And then we make a big jump back here to first position, and we have a chord shape here that in standard tuning this would be a diminished 7th chord. 1st fret, 2nd fret, 1st fret, 2nd fret. You would normally have a diminished 7th there, but in this tuning it's just a D7. Good old-fashioned D7 chord, but you have to play this note now because of the tuning. And then your thumb still continues to alternate. leaving your finger here, your first finger on the 4th string. Don't pick it up. You drop into this shape, which now you're playing a G. You have to compensate for the tuning here. Simple G and D alternating bass note. So what we have so far is so far to this point in the piece, the thumb has just been bouncing back and forth between 2 strings, usually 6 and 4, a little bit of 4 and 3. But now we have one of these classic Phil Keaggy little licks that breaks up the rhythm. Very chromatic little move, very cool, as they usually are. So there's a hammer on there from E to G. You could pick all of those if you wanted to, but it sounds cooler if you hammer them on. This finger hasn't moved, and this is an important aspect of Phil's style. Phil tends to hang on to all notes that he can as long as he can. He doesn't pick anything up until he absolutely has to, so that's everything ring together. The whole chord pulls up. This finger's still down from before. And now what we have here is basically an A chord. Da, da. And then here we have another chromatic walk up. He's walking up to this C here. So coming off the A chord. Now here we have basically a C chord, but because of the 6th in the bass, it's a C6 chord. This bar has to stay really tight because you're reaching out here with your pinky finger for the 12th fret here. Da, 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 da. There's your harmony. And Phil tends to bite this note off. It isn't necessarily, he doesn't run it together legato like that. He tends to snap that one off. A little stylistic effect there. Now this second finger, which is on this E note at the 9th fret of the 3rd string, it stays put. You're going to leave it down and spin into this shape. So we're coming from here and pivot on that finger. And what we have here is an E minor chord. In standard tuning, this would be this chord, you know. But because of the tuning, as the way it's changed it, the note that's normally here is now here, and so you have to adjust your shape a little bit. Just a regular E minor chord, even though it doesn't look like one. Bum, bum, bum. So once again, your thumb is just bouncing while you... So this part goes... So from the moment that you landed this chord, this C chord here, coming out of this earlier part, walk up into it. For the moment you land that chord, this finger stays on this string for quite a while. It moves around a little bit, but it never picks up. There's a spot where the rhythm breaks. Phil hits the low E there twice. And just come right back to where you were. Back to that same C shape. This is an A minor 6, just a straight up bar chord, just no fingers needed. Then we drop back into this guy. You have a G on top on the 1st string, and this E here on the 4th string. And that's basically your E minor chord. And this is where Phil goes to kind of a dead thumb technique, where he's just thumping on that E the whole time. So once again, he breaks that sort of alternating Chet Atkins style rhythm for that one little phrase here. You know, just while he's thudding along. Now he goes back to this C shape up here, and we've seen all this before. Nothing new there. And now we have another one of these Keaggy licks that he is so well known for, that incorporates open strings with large interval hammer-ons. So what you start off with is, you have to use your fourth finger there and get a good hammer on there. We're basically outlining an arpeggio of a B7 chord, because he's getting ready to go back into the E minor part, so he's just kind of setting that up. But in the meantime, he's going to play this interesting little lick. So you go here, 5th fret, 4th fret, and slide up to the 5th fret on the 4th string. And when you put your pinky down here, your 4th finger on the 3rd string, drop them both down. Drop both these fingers down at the same time, because you're going to need this note next. You might as well put them down at the same time. And this whole chord, you wind up with that effect in the middle. Kind of a bluesy thing. You actually don't play the 2nd string at all. You could. It works in the chord. This is just a big B7 chord. He just doesn't happen to use the 2nd string. Once you get that rolling, it feels really good. We're going to start off on this E minor chord again, this 2-finger E minor chord. And here's where our thumb is just going to bounce now. Just have 2 fingers there. You know, in standard tuning, that would be like an A2. So we have. Now this finger here can just drop back into that G chord we saw earlier. Your middle finger now is playing the melody note here on the 3rd string. Now your 2nd finger stays put. We wind up with this chord here, which looks kind of like a D chord in standard tuning, but you move it over here. These 2 fingers now stay put. This finger drops back here. This is a C in the bass now. You grab the G here. And now everybody's got to move. So this is a really good example of Phil being able to use common fingers between chords. You start off with, you got one finger that doesn't pick up, it just moves back. Now you got one finger that doesn't move here, and these guys move. Now you got 2 fingers that don't move. And now finally everybody has to move. You have an A here on the 3rd string. This note on the 4th string is an F sharp. So once again we have a B7 chord. Something Phil likes to do very much is hammer on. You hammer on at the same time you hit a thumb note. So that takes a little bit of doing to get that motion down. You're hammering at the exact same time you hit a thumb note. This finger here is free to do this. What you have basically here is a power chord, E and B. And so you can so when you hit this little G power chord, and pull it off to the open strings. And then we have another classic Phil Keaggy technique, which is the slap-on harmonic. If you've never done this very much, it's a very fun technique. You know, you have harmonics that occur all over the neck, very strong at the 12th fret, and you can play them, of course, by picking them while holding your finger over the harmonic node. But if you just smack the string right over the top of the fret, it has to be directly over the 12th fret here. If you just slap it, you can get those harmonics to pop out. And this is a fundamental technique of Phil Keaggy's style. He loves to smack harmonics all over the neck, and this is the one spot in the song where he does this in Paka. So you have this pull off, you know, 1 string, 2 strings, 3 strings. This is however many you can get to come out. And then he slaps, ba-da-bum-bum, but instead of picking it, he smacks it. He's just kind of slapping the strings up here. 15th fret, 14th fret, 12th, it doesn't really matter. What he's looking for is that percussive thud. You could smack it at the 15th fret and try to get a harmonic out of it. But that's not really what Phil's doing. He just wants that, that wood thud. So that whole section goes like this. Now everybody moves. On the last one, you can try to get that 12th fret there. If the harmonics come out, cool. If not, you still get a nice, solid E power chord there. And almost anything works in there. If you get that C sharp in there, it's going to be over so fast, no one's going to care anyway. That's basically the verse. And then what happens is, he does the whole thing again. Everything you just did, you do again. No changes. Except instead of doing the little power chord pull-off lick, he goes back into that earlier lick that we saw. And now we're going to go back into a whole section of material that we've seen before. Phil goes back into that earlier section. All the same stuff we saw before. And here comes this guy again. So if you can get past that, the whole next section of the piece is all stuff we've seen before. And it will come back again. So you'll be pretty good at that by the end of the song. Now, in the recording from Acoustic Sketches, he plays the entire verse all over again. Everything that we just did from this part. All that stuff happens twice. And no changes, no differences at all. He comes off of this lick the second time, and now we go into a new part. But we start off with this E minor chord that we saw earlier. The same one where that chord right there. This chord starts off the bridge. Except, instead of fingering this 1, 2, and 3, for this particular instance of this chord, it's really better to finger this with your fourth finger because of what happens later. I mean, you could do it and then switch later, but it's easier to do it now, I feel. So we have this E minor chord, and now you take your first finger back a fret. So we've gone from E minor to basically an E with an added second, or added ninth, however you want to look at it. And what he's going to do is he's going to start taking all these notes down, one fret at a time. And it's very, very pretty what happens here. Take it back down 1 on the second string. Now take your second finger, move it down 1. So we've gone from E minor to E added 9 to E major 9. And you got a bar here, and pick up that B right there. And this is why this is helpful to have this fourth finger already here, because the next thing you're going to do is pick this finger off entirely. Your second finger leaves completely, and you wind up with this chord shape, which is an E minor 9. And this would be a little harder to do if you had this finger where it was. So that's why it's better to start off with that fourth finger there. Drop your second string, drop your third string, drop your third string again. Now this whole thing is going to pick up. This finger hasn't gotten up yet. It just slid back. Second finger comes back on, and now we have an A chord. A major. Right? This finger hasn't gotten up yet. It's even, Phil drags this note, and you can still hear it. That's why it's important to keep that note there. Now we go to A minor. Take your second finger back off. Third finger comes in here. This finger finally comes off. After all this time, it finally comes off. So this note, he kind of wants it to die down. So you've gone from your A major chord, A minor, and now we start to go with what used to be our E minor chord, except now he's gone to major for a second here. So he's got to grab this G sharp out here. So now instead of your third finger being here, it's going to be your second, and you wind up with this chord shape, E major. And it's also, you also have to finger it this way because you need this finger back here. So it's just da 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 da. Sometimes when Phil plays this live, he'll do this. He'll hammer that on between the second and fourth frets there. So far in our bridge we have A minor, E major. Now we're going to take what would be an A chord, you know, like your good old-fashioned rock and roll A chord, except in this tuning, this chord is a B9 now. That's the way the tuning is. So what we're going to do is we're going to slide into it. Your melody note's on the 3rd string. Now remember, before we were doing this chord, earlier in the piece, it looked like this. B and the F sharp and the A. This bass note's important, so you finally pick it back up. 3rd finger comes in to play the 2nd string, because the melody note's going dun, dun, dun. You got to walk your way into that. So, bass note. This finger's now going to ride this string again up to here. These 2 fingers drop in on frets 4 and 5 on those 2 strings. And we have basically our nice strong E major chord. Slide this guy up. And then Phil does this little cute trick with the bass note. So you have to have some 4th finger strength here. Make sure you keep that pressure down. A nice full E chord there. Now we're going to drop back into this chord we just did a second ago, except whereas before we were playing the B in the bass, now we're going to play the E. Kind of thudding along. So initially you're barring. You're barring here, and you're going to be barring across that 1st string. But at some point you got to pick up off of that string because you need that open E string there in a second. So you have to kind of do sort of a hinge bar right there. When you put that 3rd finger down on the 4th fret there, this finger has to come up. Your 1st finger has to come off that 1st string because you're going to go. He wants that da da da. Get that A and that D sharp together. Sound very cool. And then we shift positions completely. You're going to go up here to the 6th fret of the 3rd string, 7th fret of the 4th string. Still thudding along on that E, still thumping along. So we have this da da da, but this finger has to hold this note, so you have to go scoot forward. Your 1st finger has to play 2 of those 3 notes. Phil grabs this G sharp here at the end of that phrase. Sometimes when Phil plays this live, he will grab this 9th fret note here from the very beginning and he'll go. He'll have that G sharp ringing the whole time. He'll play them together. I have seen him do it both ways. So what we have here from the beginning is then. Now we're going to go back to this chord where we just were, except now we're going to play B in the bass. We've been hearing a lot of that thuddy E all along, and now we're going to go to the B chord. Get off the 2nd string completely while still hanging on to this guy. And then the whole thing slides up. 2nd finger comes back down, and there's that E chord we saw earlier. Now on the recording, Phil does this before going back into the A section. You can do that. That sounds fine. There's a big pause there before he heads back into the head of the thing, and so you can do the slide. I have done this. It's a nice place for a harmonic, you know. Oops, I'm sorry. Anything like that before you go back into the beginning. You could hit harmonics here. You could play any kind of a lick there. Anything to fill that gap. So be creative and come up with your own idea. It could sound cool. Now from this point on, much of what follows is stuff that we've seen before. He goes back to the very beginning, although he usually slides into it for that first note. And it's largely the same stuff that we've seen before. There are a couple of small variations, which I'll show you. So coming off this slide, all the same stuff. No surprises here. There's your first variation. Before, Phil went bum, ba-da-da-bum, bum. Here he throws in an extra A. Just a little difference, but enough to get your attention. Just different enough to where you notice it. Now we're going to go back up here. Here's your other variation. He goes ba-da-bum-bum. Right? Same E minor chord we've been playing all along. Leave this finger there. Leave your fourth finger right where it is on that A. Your first finger has to do a slide back. And it's real easy to lose that note. It's real easy to go and lose it. Lose it right when you're crossing the fret. It's not hard to lose that note. So you've got to keep your pressure down. Since this finger was still there, that was easy enough. Now pick it up. So your first finger has a little bit of shifting around to do. Bum. And then from there, it's all stuff we've seen. Now here we're going to go back into the verse, but it's going to end differently because we're pushing towards the end of the piece now. So we start off with what we've seen before. All very familiar stuff. All stuff we've covered. And it's right here that Phil introduces entirely new material. To have a big finale, he does this. Now, because you have this shape here, E, C sharp, and G, we have an E minor 6 there. So if you move that shape anywhere, whatever you're playing is going to be some sort of an E minor, of a minor 6 chord. You can play it like this with a bar, which is what Phil tends to do. I tend to play it with 3 fingers because I just like the way it transitions into the next thing better. Either way works. So then these 2 fingers come down on strings 3 and 4, right in front of your bar. And and the bass note is walking up one fret at a time. So I tend to do this, that way these fingers are already down. Now jump these two fingers up 2 frets, and this finger comes in one behind it. You have 2 chords in a row where these fingers don't have to move. Then you do it again. Then you shift one more time. And all you're doing is switching back and forth between your straight shape and your slightly crooked shape. Another voicing of B7. Then it puts the E in the bass. So when you do it fast, Phil tends to finger it like this. Same effect. He likes the bar chord. I tend to do it this way. Then you have this odd little lick that is so much fun as your big finale to the piece. So there's a lot going on in there. 12th fret to 10th fret, E to D. So this open E string, first string, gets in there a couple of times. And then you have a slide and a pull off from the 13th fret, which makes it kind of a minor. Actually makes it a bluesy thing. D, C sharp, B. So it's a minor third from the B. And that's really one of the trickiest parts of the whole thing, I think, is getting this middle note. That C sharp right there has a tendency to get swallowed by everything else going on around it. It's like it's there and it's gone, so you got to make sure you get it really good. Now you add the bass note to it at the very beginning. I tend to use my thumb to play that. I used to use my finger, then I found out my thumb just sounded stronger. Yeah. Now Phil just hits the string here at the end, the 6th string. You could play the whole thing, you know. It's all a big E minor chord. You could play that, you could fret that, you could fret that. It's all a big E minor chord, you know. I have tried them all. You know, they all sound cool in their way. I always kind of like that one, but the recorded version is just. And you know, Phil recorded this song on a resonator guitar, and gave it a really unique personality to it. It sounds very cool on a resonator if you have one, but of course it works very well on an acoustic steel string too. The Paka is a reference to a nickname that's in Phil's family that people called his father. The song is about Phil's father, James. Paka was what his grandchildren called him. That was an affectionate term for grandfather. And so this is a tribute song to his dad. There are lyrics to it. He released it instrumentally on Acoustic Sketches in 1997. And then a few years later, he did an album called Inseparable, in which he included the lyrics, which are very specifically about his father. It's a very biographical piece, and very lovely tribute to his dad. And the guitar part is wonderful. And it works very well as an instrumental, and I've been playing it for years and have always enjoyed it. It's one of my favorite pieces that Phil's ever done for me. So I hope that this has shed some light on how to play this and all the little nuances that Phil puts into it. And good luck and have fun with it.